Now what I want to reiterate is that this is not your plan file, okay? Yes, my original plan is XREF'd into this file, but this is still my drawing 1 file, and it's only an XREF, okay? So if I select it, I can't select any individual objects. It selects the XREF on the whole. If I go into my window, into my layers window, okay, you'll see that there are now additional layers, but what this means is that if it has the name of your original plan file, okay, the file name first, and then a line, and then the name of the layer, what this means is that this is an XREF layer, okay? Technically, I can't draw in any of these, but when we start to work with it a little bit more, we're going to turn them on and off as we need to, okay? So again, just keep in mind that this is only an image and we can't do anything with it, okay? But we can make sure that it's always updated by editing the original, okay? And to do that, there's a few ways of doing that, okay? One is to actually open up the original plan. Okay, and if I make changes to it, now this is the original plan, you know, any changes we should make technically should be to the modified plan. But if I take out, let's say, some walls and draw in, you know, an arc or something like that. Oops. Nope. This is 1'9". Okay, make sure that these are on your wall layer. So I'm going to match properties, even though it's hard to see because they're both white. Okay, and I start to make changes like that. If I save this original and then go back into my drawing one where it's XREF'd, it's going to give me a little notification telling me that my XREF has been updated, okay? What this is going to do is it's going to pop up whenever I'm actually in the drawing in which my plan is XREF'd. If it's not, and I make changes to my plan and I close, you know, this is all closed out, the next time I open it up, it's always going to be up to date, okay? But if I'm in this file and I make those changes in my original plan, okay, it's going to come up with that bubble. If I click on it, okay, it'll make those updates. Okay, you'll see that it disappeared because I went into my other drawing. But what I can do is I can go back into my XREF manager, and if it has this little yield sign or this attention sign, that basically tells me, as it's telling me, that this needs reloading. Okay, so I can right click on that and I can say reload, and you'll see that now it made those changes. Okay, so that's the first way of doing it. The second way of doing it is just by doing the same thing. Okay, if I close out of my original plan, is to right click on the name of the XREF, go into open, and it's going to open your original file. So if you have a ton of XREFs and you don't know where they are, you can always just go into list, right click on it, and go to open. Okay, this is, now I'm in my original plan, and again, if I make these changes and save them, okay, close this out, go back into my drawing 1, okay, it'll recognize that those changes have been made. I'm going to click on the bubble, okay, and now you'll see that it updated it with that new information. Now the third way is the way that I usually do it, but it is a little tricky, okay, and it does take some practice, because essentially what it does is it kicks you into the XREF editing mode, which is a lot like the block editing mode, but, you know, there are some, you know, it can get a little bit confusing. But to do that, what I do is I double click on it, and it's going to go into the reference edit list. And don't worry about these below, okay? These are basically kind of like sub-drawings, okay, and blocks within the original XREF. What I'm going to do is where that red icon, that red drawing icon, I'm just going to make sure that that first, you know, week 3 original plan is highlighted, and I'm going to hit OK. You can just, you know, it should automatically be updated, so you should just be able to hit OK off the bat. And what this is going to do is you'll notice that now I can select those individual objects, okay? But if you look at the top, it says that this is drawing 1. So I'm actually in my drawing, and this is technically the XREF. But what it's doing is it's accessing the XREF plan from the drawing that I'm in right now. Okay, it's kind of this weird bizarro thing, and the only way you can figure this out is if you see these tools, okay, and it's not obvious in the upper right here. Okay, now in earlier versions of AutoCAD, it's a little easy to kind of get stuck in this world, okay, in this ref editing world, and you'll find that if you don't close out of the ref edit, okay, the reference editing mode, that it's going to start to do weird things. So make sure that you always have, if you work with this method, okay, that you always have one eye up here to make sure that you're not actually in your XREF editing mode when you're trying to do something else somewhere else. Okay, but in this, what I can do is, again, I can, oops, I got rid of one of my guidelines, but that's just going to have to happen. I'm just going to make some changes. Okay, and when I'm done with that, okay, let's say I'm going to, get rid of these walls here too as well. Let's say get rid of this guy. Okay, and then now I'm editing the original. If I go to save changes, okay, and also if I don't want to save the changes, I can also discard the changes. Okay, but what that does is it'll save the changes and it'll save them back to the original file. Okay, so if I want to save the changes, I can say okay. What it's going to do is it's going to save those changes, and then you'll see that now I'm back in my drawing file. Okay, my drawing one. This is an XREF. Okay, but it's not only reflecting the changes that were made here, but if I go to open the original, you'll see that in the original file, okay, you'll see that those changes are there too as well. So I can make those changes while I'm in the XREF, okay, just by double clicking on it, accessing the original file through that and making the changes. And, or I can change the original file and it's going to keep those changes updated. Okay, these are always coordinated. Which is, the great thing behind it. It just takes a little bit of effort to try to, figure out why we use these. Okay, so I'm going to close out of the original file. I don't have to save the changes because they've already been made. And I'm going to go back into the drawing, okay, in which this drawing is XREF'd. Okay, now you'll see that when I already right-clicked on the XREF name, okay, you'll see that there are a few options when dealing with these XREFs. Okay, one is to open the original file. Okay, one is to attach. So if we want to attach another one, we can either go to attach or we can use the button up here. What happens is the more XREFs that you have in a file, the more your file is going to get bogged down. Okay, so as I said earlier, what you can do is you can actually copy and rotate these XREFs in order to make sure that you have the most current information for elevations, for example. Okay, if you have so many of them and they're bogging down your file, what you can actually do is you can unload it. And what it does is it doesn't get rid of it, it just essentially hides it. Okay, so that if you need them back, you can right click on this again, go to reload, okay, and you'll see that it pops back up again. Now also what happens is that when you go to do some things, okay, AutoCAD might ask you to reload the original file before it can do something. Okay, so it'll tell you if it needs to be reloaded too as well, as we saw earlier. What we can also do is we can detach it. Okay, and this is the only way that you get rid of an XREF. I can delete it, okay, but you'll see that what happens is that it's still in my file. Okay, so I can't technically delete it and get rid of the reference of it. So if I go to attach it again, it is going to tell me that it's already in my file. Okay, so the only way to get rid of, and I'm going to undo that, the only way to get rid of this XREF is to right click on it and go to detach. Okay, and now you'll see that it erases it from the record. Okay, I'm going to undo that to get it back. And then the last one, we're not going to get into XREF type. I mean, you can change that here, okay, if you want to change it from an attachment to an overlay. And then there's also, you can change the paths too as well. I'm not going to get into that. But the other thing to consider is that when you bind your XREF, and a lot of times this happens if you're sharing files, okay, because this is a linked file. It is actually looking for a place on your computer in order to find it and in order to reference it. Okay, a lot of times if you're sending drawings to somebody else who's working with your AutoCAD files, okay, if you just send it like it is now, save it and send it, they're not going to see this, okay, because down here you'll see under the properties you know, again, you can change attachment and overlay here, but at found at and saved path, okay, this is where AutoCAD is looking for that file. Okay, if it's not there, then it's going to tell you that it can't be found, okay, or it's unreferenced. And then what you have to do is you have to click on the XREF. You should go to Save Path, and you can relink it back up again. Okay, so what you are going to have issues when you save, you know, your sheet files. You know, when we start to work with it, if you start them in class and then you move them to your computer at home, okay, or you start to work with, you know, if, for example, your flash drive is a different drive on the computer at school versus the one at home, okay, it's going to lose the link theoretically, okay, it might not, but if it does, then what you need to do is you need to go and you need to click on Save Path, and you need to relink it again to where where it can reference it again, okay. Now, if I bind it, okay, so if I right click on it and go to bind, what it does, and again, this is if you're sharing it with somebody and you want them to have just a snapshot of it, okay, or where it is at its current point, okay, you can go to bind and you can hit OK, and what it does is it detaches and it takes off the link of the XREF and it turns it into a block. So if I double click on it, you'll see that it wants to go into my block editor, okay, and I can change it in my block editor. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to change it with our block editor, okay. We just want to bind it so that somebody has a reference of it and they're not looking for it somewhere, okay. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our XREF there, and we want to make sure that it's accessing the original file, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that whenever we change it, this always is updated. And again, we'll see how that works in later lessons.